Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clay, and I am the Bucks believer. This coming offseason, the Bucks have one road to adding a playoff contributor level talent to their roster. That comes in the form of their $5.9 million taxpayer mid-level exception. Earlier today, I talked about some guards that the Bucks could sign with their exception money, and now I'm going to be discussing some wings that they could add. Let's start by talking about one of this year's most intriguing free agents, Otto Porter. The biggest concern with Porter is that he seemingly cannot stay healthy. Over the past 2 seasons, injuries have haunted him, and he's played just 42 games in those 2 years combined. Even with that being said, I still think that Porter would be a great signing for the Bucks because he's probably one of the best value grabs in the NBA today. When Otto is healthy, he is an extremely high-level 3-and-D wing player, as backed up by his stellar seasons with the Washington Wizards. Over the course of his NBA career, Porter has shot 40.2% from beyond the three-point line and done so off of some difficult shots. He's become an extremely high-level movement shooter in today's NBA, which would fit in extremely well with a Bucks offense that is in need of more spacing. In addition to his knockdown shooting, Porter is also one of the best big wing defenders in today's NBA, combining an excellent frame at 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan with some excellent defensive instincts. Those instincts allow him to be a defensive playmaker, as he's posted a career 2.1% steal rate and 1.3% block rate. Porter is a huge risk when it comes to free agent signings, but the reward behind that risk is about as large as any come for the Bucks this offseason. A far less risky proposition for the Bucks to sign with their taxpayer mid-level exception is Doug Mcdermott. Over the past couple seasons, Mcdermott has established himself as one of the most consistent bench scorers in the entire NBA. The biggest reason for this is his beautiful three-point stroke. Over his career, Mcdermott has shot 40.7% from beyond the arc, and similar to Porter, many of those have been contested off of movement three-point shots. In addition to his deadly shot from beyond the arc, Mcdermott also has improved what he can do inside the arc, as he shot a career-high 64.1% on two-point field goals this past season. That's boosted by his incredible 71.6% conversion rate at the rim. The reason why Mcdermott is able to score so efficiently inside the arc is because he is a terrific cutter. He does a great job of finding gaps in the opposing defense and then shooting to those gaps to get off wide open shots. In addition to his great cutting, Mcdermott is also solid at attacking closeouts, as he utilizes shot fakes very well and can get to the mid-range and rise up for an easy 15-foot shot. The reason why Mcdermott could be available for the Bucks at this $5.9 million mark instead of getting much more on the open market is because he doesn't do much besides score. He's not much of a playmaker, and he also is quite poor on the defensive end of the court. Probably the worst defensive player I'll talk about in this video. He also doesn't create shots for himself and is reliant on his teammates to find him for open looks. Even with all of that being said, Mcdermott is still a really solid option for the Bucks to sign if he is available. As I just mentioned, Doug McDermott is probably the worst defender that I'll talk about in today's video. On the other hand, Nick Batum may very well be the best defender that I will be discussing. At 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan, Batum packs just enough strength and agility into his 230-pound frame to viably play the 3, the 4, and the 5. This makes him a very interesting option to plug into the Bucks front court, as he could either play in a big lineup with Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo, a regular lineup with just one of those two players, or a small ball lineup where he's functioning as the team's 5-man. This would make him a fun tool for Coach Mike Budenholzer to use when coming up with defensive schemes for next season. In addition to his great positional versatility, Batum is also a legit defensive playmaker, posting steal and block rates of 1.6% for his career. Batum's offense is a little bit worse than his defense, but he did make drastic improvements as a shooter last season, knocking down a career-high 40.4% of his three-point shots. Batum is also a sneakily good passer for his player archetype, posting a 17.8% career assist rate. Batum might overlap too much with PJ Tucker to be a true option for the Bucks to sign with their taxpayer mid-level exception, but if they do bring him in, he will certainly help them out on defense and may bring a little bit of a jump start to their offense as well. At 6'4", 195 pounds, Kent Bazemore is much more of a 2-3 than a 3-4, which makes him quite different from every other player that I've talked about so far in today's video. Despite his scant frame, Bazemore is still capable of switching up the lineup because of his 7-foot wingspan. He's useful in a switching scheme as he can guard 1 through 4, which should be very intriguing for the Bucks. He's also probably the best defensive playmaker out of this group, as he has career steal rate of 2.4% and a career block rate of 2.0%. When you have steal and block rates of over 2% each, you're generally regarded as an elite defensive player, and Bazemore fits that mold. Unfortunately, his offense cannot nearly keep up with his defense. Bazemore doesn't do anything in terms of shot creation and playmaking, and while he did have a fantastic three-point shooting season last year, knocking down 40.8% of his shots, he's generally been pretty inconsistent throughout his career, as he sits at just 35.6% for his career. If the Bucks buy Bazemore being a 40% three-point shooter as he was last year, I think he would be a great piece to add with their taxpayer mid-level exception. However, if they think that he will shoot closer to what his career numbers have indicated, then I'd probably pass on him. Furkan Korkmaz is a long-range gunner in the mold of Duncan Robinson, as he takes 9.1 three-pointers per 36 minutes. Korkmaz isn't as efficient of a shooter as Robinson, as he made 37.5% of his three-pointers last season, but he is still a tremendous floor-spacing threat, and he would thrive next to Giannis Antetokounmpo on offense. He's also a much better defender than what you would usually see from this type of player archetype. Korkmaz has excellent size for his position at 6'7" with a 6'10" wingspan, and he does a great job of utilizing those tools en route to having a 2.2% steal rate, so he can function as a defensive playmaker. I'm not in love with Korkmaz because he doesn't do much as a shot creator or playmaker, and he still can be taken advantage of defensively, but as a three-point gunner, he's probably the best option that the Bucks will have in this free agency class. Trevor Ariza probably has the best defensive reputation of any player on this list. He has loads of experience guarding the best big wings that the NBA has to offer, and at 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan, he certainly has the frame to do it. However, Ariza is approaching the age of 36, and over the past couple years, his defense has been on a certain downtrend. This was apparent in the first round of last year's NBA playoffs, where Ariza's Miami Heat were facing our Milwaukee Bucks. Over different portions of this series, Ariza was asked to guard Chris Middleton and Giannis Antetokounmpo on separate occasions, and each of those two players were able to get to their spots and easily score when defended by Ariza. In addition to his defense being in decline, he's also not nearly the three-point shooter that people seem to rate him as. He shot just 35.2% from beyond the arc throughout his career, and it's taken some pretty extreme outlier seasons to get him to that mark alone. I think that Ariza is probably someone that I'd like to stay away from if I were the Bucks, because he's not as good of a three-point shooter as people seem to think, and his defense is definitely on the downswing. Reggie Bullock does a lot of the same things as Trevor Ariza, but he, in my opinion, does them better. Bullock is certainly the superior shooter out of the two, as he's made 39.2% of his three-pointers across his NBA career. Bullock can also hit those shots off of movement, particularly out of the pick and pop, where he's a very viable option. We saw this play run quite frequently with the New York Knicks last season, as Julius Randle would function as the ball handler and Bullock would function as the screener. Randle would start to drive and Bullock would flare out to the three-point line for what would oftentimes be a wide-open shot from above the break. This could carry over quite well to the Milwaukee Bucks if Bullock were to sign with them, as he could run the same play with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis ran the inverted pick and roll quite frequently last season with Pat Connaughton and Bryn Forbes, so Bullock would simply fold right into the offense in that fashion. Reggie's also a very solid defensive player. He's not much of a playmaker, but he definitely does a good job of making good choices and staying solid when guarding sometimes the best player on the opposing team. Bullock is a 3-and-D wing and not much else, but he plays that role at a high level, and for that reason would be an intriguing option for the Bucks to bring in, if possible. Thank you all for watching today's video. I hope that you greatly enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Especially if you are a fellow Bucks believer, this is the place for you. Also, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below which of these wing players you'd like to see the Bucks target in free agency. For me personally, I would love to see them go after Otto Porter, as I think he's the best player on this list. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover, so that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.